There we go. Any questions on speed to lead? Okay, none. Either that means one of two things. It either makes sense to everyone, or people are realizing, hey, we're not actually doing a very good job of this, or I can't remember the last time I checked my average time to dial. I don't know what my front desk is actually doing, right? We have an SOP, but I don't know if they're prioritizing calls over other things, right? So make sure that you know where this is, because again, if this link in your chain is broken, you could do everything else right. You could have amazing in-office experience ready and waiting for patients who will never ever show up because you're just not calling the leads on time. So make sure you get this piece sorted first, because then nothing else is going to matter if the patients don't come to the practice. Okay, next step here. The first phone call, right? Once you're actually dialing, the next immediate thing that happens is the patient picks up the phone, or the patient's called you and you picked up the phone, right? So your first impression really counts here. You need to treat every call like it's your last chance. And what that means is, if your team has the mindset of, okay, yeah, I'll give you some information, and hey, just let us know when you want to schedule, and you can call us back anytime we're here. Wrong mindset, right? If you have a new patient on the phone, the whole goal here should be, let's get you scheduled right now, right? Even if that's, hey, I know you don't know what your schedule looks like next week. I mean, the patient schedule. Let's just book you in, and then we could circle back on this Monday and see if that time still works or we need something else, right? Like, they need to be focused on, we need to book this patient. And if they're not, if their mindset is, I'm just going to give good information, I'm just going to let the patient decide when they want to book, you're losing potential patients, right? And again, putting focus on this is going to yield a huge ROI, because every patient that potentially comes in, just look at the LTV on the patients at your practice. Okay. What to do actually on the call though? Don't rush the calls, right? Um, your new patient calls need to be longer than 5 minutes, right? Now, for some of you, that's going to sound like a long time. Like, oh my gosh, should I be spending, 30 minutes on the call? No, don't spend 30 minutes. But 10 to 15 minutes is really good for a new patient call. The reason is, you don't want to be transactional. If you're transactional, then the patient just calls every practice in town and sees who's going to give them the lowest price, or they book a bunch of appointments and then they're price shopping, right? When you do transactional things, when you commodify yourself, people look for the lowest price. If someone, a builder is buying lumber, they don't really care if they buy the lumber from this guy or that guy. They just want the cheapest supply, right? So if you just give them the information and just say, hey, this is what we've got, you should book a call, they're going to transactionalize the interaction. Instead, you want to build a relationship, because people will go out of their way to do business with their friends and family, and they won't do it for strangers. You got to get out of the stranger bucket and into the friends and family bucket as soon as possible, right? And the way you do that is by taking time on the call. This goes back to your front desk, right? If they are overwhelmed, if your office is running behind schedule, then you're not going to be giving a great new patient phone call experience. And if that's happening, then you're wasting leads. So you need to be able to correct it, right? Especially look at phone call lengths during peak hours, right? Like when we've got the most patients and most things going on in the office. If that phone call time drops down to like 2 minutes, 3 minutes for new patient phone calls, you are wasting leads. Make sure it's above 5 minutes, ideally between 10 to 15. Again, best way to solve this problem is hire someone whose only job it is to speak with new patients over the phone, right? you'll see a tremendous return on that investment in that person because the speed of lead is better, the time spent on the phone calls is better, and this person is not trying to juggle a bunch of tasks. They're only connecting with people. And that will give you quite a bit of advantage in your city when you're competing for patients. Okay, we kind of already talked about this. You need to make sure that you're creating that personal experience. Notes. Okay, this is really important. It's not just about what the patient needs clinically, right? If you're like, okay, this patient says she needs a crown, right? Like, yes, put that in the notes. But also, this should relate to what the patient is feeling emotionally, anything that's coming up, right? If the patient tells you, hey, I'm really embarrassed because I'm missing teeth, and I'm going to my granddaughter's wedding later this year, maybe in October, put that in the notes. Why? Because your treatment coordinator should know that. The doctor should know that. Everyone in the office should know this patient is concerned not just because, oh, I don't have teeth, but because how it makes that patient feel. And because that patient is going to a wedding. And because at the wedding, there's tons and tons of pictures, and this patient's probably worried about their smile during those pictures, right? If your notes are not at that level, then you're not creating that personal experience. You're just creating a transactional experience. And every time you create a transactional experience, the patient will code down to the price and they'll say, give me the cheapest price, right? Or I'm going to get a second opinion. That doesn't happen when you have a personal connection with the patient. So make sure you're taking great notes on that phone call and you're getting everyone in the team access. So when that patient comes in, you can say, oh, hello, Mrs. Johnson. Hey, so excited you're here. We're going to make sure you have a beautiful smile for your granddaughter's wedding. Like, if that's the first thing she hears when she walks through the door, what are the chances that that patient says, hey, I'm going to go get a second opinion on a cheaper price for implants? It's like almost zero. Why? Because that patient goes, well, wow, these people really care. And that's worth a lot. It's worth so much. Okay. You need to be tracking. We have the new patient appointment tracker linked in here. We don't have time to go into it today. Everyone will get this PDF. These links are active. You can click them and get access to all the documents referenced in here. Essentially, what you measure is going to be improved, right? And if you don't measure it, you're not going to get any progress. So if you're not actually tracking your new patient phone calls, right? Like you're not reviewing the metrics on the amount of time spent on the phone, right? Your booking rates, your show rates. If you don't have access to those numbers because you're not tracking them, then you're not serious about improving your conversion on the phone, right? And that's okay. If you recognize that, if you say, hey, look, we have some operational issues to solve first, right? Like we're overwhelmed, go fix that, right? That you're never going to get better until you fix that. But you need to understand, like, hey, are we actually tracking this? Or do we just think like, hey, the numbers are in there, right? Tracking doesn't just mean the numbers get put in somewhere. It also means they get reviewed on a weekly basis. Like, do you actually know your booking rates and your show rates and your new patient call times week to week to week? Do you have a place where you're looking at those numbers and say, oh, you know what, during the past 6 weeks, we've improved our new patient phone call time from 5 minutes and 47 seconds to 7 minutes and 12 seconds. If you don't know that, you're not serious about getting better on the phone. And again, that's okay. You might have other priorities to fix first, but just don't trick yourself. Review at least 5 calls per week. This is really, really important. You do the calls, hold down the calls, right? It's only going to take 30 to 60 minutes, right? These calls should be between 10 to 15 minutes, or less if you really need help, right? Even if your monthly show rate improves by 5%, assuming everything else in your chain is working, that 5% is going to go straight onto production, right? So let's say your practice is making 200,000 in monthly production, right? It means that time could be worth anywhere from 250 to $2,500 to $7,500 per hour, right? That's really valuable time to actually review the calls. So again, if you're not pulling several calls per week and listening to them and giving your team feedback about, hey, you said this, but maybe you could have said that. If you're not doing that, then you're just leaving that money on the table. So don't skip the call review. Again, if you're overwhelmed, fix it, but know that this is the process for getting better. Okay, 80% of your new patient phone calls should book an appointment, right? If they're not doing that, right, first you have to track your booking rate to get that number. But if they're not, here's how to solve it. Use the gold standard call checklist. Many of you have seen this before. It's linked in here. If the checklist is not cutting it, give the outbound and inbound scripts to your team and tell them just read this, right? If their phone calls are very bad, sometimes it's better to have them read. Ideally, you want them trained. The checklist training is better, but it takes longer to implement. So if you need quick results, just give them the script and say, read it. Okay, I've been talking a bit here. Does anyone have any questions on the first phone call with the patient? Is this information valuable to everyone? If yes, put a 1 or a yes in the chat. Okay, Mindy says yes. Yes. Okay, cool. We're tracking well here. Perfect. Confirming the appointment. This is important. I want to cover some other topics on this sheet. Everyone will get access to this. So we'll let you do that. Mindy says, I believe connecting with the patient is very, very crucial and it gives a better result. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Like if your car breaks down and your uncle has a mechanic shop, you're going to take it to him, even if you have to drive 10 extra minutes. And even if his mechanics have a slightly higher hourly rate. Why? Because he's your uncle. Hopefully you like him and you trust him, right? You're going to go and do business with your family because they're in your circle. So the more connection you can build with your patient, the more they'll give you that family treatment, right? It goes both ways. You want to treat your patients like family because then they'll treat you like family. But most offices treat patients like commodities. So you have to be the one to take the first step. Okay. Let's talk about consult targets. When you're running the consults, there's, how do we put this? You can get more done by saying less, right? So this is for your doctors, your associates. If your office manager in here listening, then you want to gently nudge them to this. But often, a lot of times, consults go sideways when too much information is shared, right? The goal of the consult should be for your doctor to get in, diagnose, find the treatment, tell the patient, and then get out, right? And it's as simple as that. You want to be using tie downs during the explanation, right? And very often. The reason here is because when we're presenting information to patients, it's information that we're very familiar with. But when the patient receives information, it's brand new, right? So it's easy for us to underestimate how difficult it is to understand on the patient side, right? Because remember, your team has probably decades of training and experience combined. You really know dentistry. Your patient doesn't. So when you're explaining the patient for their diagnosis, right? You want to use tie downs. What are tie downs? The documents here, essentially what you do is you say things like, hey, does that make sense? Okay, what made sense to you? Are you tracking with me? Okay, what did you understand? Right? So we're getting the patient to go, okay, yeah, I'm listening. And then you're saying, okay, what did you hear when you were listening? Kind of like I did with all of you. Hey, do you have any questions? Does this make sense? Do you understand this? Right? This is a training call, so I don't have time to do the other part, right? But if I was meeting with you one-on-one and explain something, okay, do you understand this? Yes. Okay, beautiful. What did you understand about this? And when you ask that second question, hey, what did you understand about this? Or what makes sense to you about what I just said? you will be shocked at the words that come out of your patient's mouth, right? Because patients will say just like, oh yeah, I understand it, because the patient doesn't want to look stupid, right? But maybe they didn't understand it. Maybe it was explained too fast. Maybe the idea was very complicated and the patient didn't get it. So when you actually ask them, hey, what did you understand? They might tell you stuff that's completely wrong, or they might just say like, hey, you know what? I didn't get that. Can you explain it again? This is really important because if your patient leaves the interaction with your doctor and goes to see the treatment coordinator, but they're uncertain about the treatment that they're being recommended, that treatment coordinator is going to have a rough time, right? They're basically have to go back and rerun the consult in the treatment coordinator room without the doctor there, which is very challenging. So you want to make sure that the patient's really crystal clear before they get to the treatment coordinator. So use tie downs on the diagnosis, use tie downs on cost of inaction. Document is linked in here. Ideally, your doctor should be doing COI as well as the treatment coordinator. Use the notes, right? The notes that you take on the first patient phone call, make sure everyone has them, make sure that these are being leveraged to build trust with your patients. Okay, does that make sense to everyone? Let me know in the chat. Yes. Okay, good. Okay. Oh, we got something here. Yes. Okay, beautiful. All right, treatment coordinator SOP. This is the timeline that they should be following, right? This is how we harvest and capitalize on the work that everyone before in the process put in. Start with cost of inaction, right? This is the kind of the bridge from the consult to the presentation of the finances, right? So again, if the patient's not emotionally invested in getting treatment, then the answer is going to be no. So we need to start with cost of inaction. For those of you who don't know, briefly, cost of inaction is making sure the patient knows here's what happens if you don't get treatment, right? You have a cavity. If you don't get treatment, the infection could expand and you would need a root canal, right? Or you need a root canal. If you don't solve this, you might lose the entire tooth and it might spread to other teeth, right? The patient needs to be really, really clear on this. And oftentimes patients say, no, I want to think about it. I'll do this later. They give you all kinds of excuses because they didn't understand what happens if they just walk out of the practice, right? This even affects patients who have been missing teeth, maybe for many years, right? The bone is going to continue to recede, and then you're not going to be able to place implants, or it gets much harder, or it gets more expensive if you do this later. The patient needs to know the cost of inaction. So your treatment coordinator should be leading with that. If you want to know how to do it, cost of inaction document is linked here. Okay, just like your doctor, your treatment coordinator needs to use lots and lots of tie downs. So when they're presenting treatment, when they're explaining the process, they need to be using, hey, did you understand that? What did you understand about that? Do you see how that works? Okay, well, what makes sense to you? Do you like that? Yes. Okay, what do you like about it? Lots and lots of tie downs because, again, we're trying to query if the patient is understanding. If they don't understand, then it's a perfect time to stop, pump the brakes, slow down, and re-explain. There's a difference between losing a patient because they just don't want treatment and because they don't understand treatment. And oftentimes it's because they don't actually understand the treatment and they don't understand the diagnosis that they're not moving forward. So like that's why tie downs are so important because we're trying to query like, hey, did the information I said get into your brain? And the only way we know that is if it starts coming back out of their mouth. So you need to ask and you need to use tie downs. Recorded treatment presentations, of course, with consent, you can get the consent form, add it to your patient intake. This is important for the same reason that we want to record your phone calls and we want to play them, right? If you're not reviewing your treatment presentations to your patients, you're not going to get any better. So start recording these. Now, if a patient says, hey, I don't want you to record me, don't record them, right? But the majority of your patients will be okay with that. and they will sign the consent form, and then you can use that as feedback for the team, right? If you're not having a weekly or at least bi-weekly review with your treatment coordinator, hey, here are the last 5 presentations you made. Here are the things you did well. Here are the things you didn't do well. Are they going to get any better? Right? And if you do spend that time and your case acceptance improves by 2%, 5%, 10%, how much more production is that? It's quite a bit, right? It's time well spent. But people skip it because it's not sexy. It's a little bit boring. It can be uncomfortable, but it's definitely worth the time investment. Track patient objections, right? And you should do this by team member. If John is getting a lot of, hey, this is too expensive objections, and Jenny is getting a lot of, hey, I need to talk to my spouse objections, then what it means is the way they're presenting causes these objections to happen, right? So then you can look back at your recordings and see what they're saying to cause these objections, right? And then you should cross-train. Whatever John is saying to avoid the spouse objection, Jenny needs to say. And then whatever Jenny is saying to avoid the price objection, John needs to start saying. So that's why tracking and recording is so important, because you can learn within your team, right? You don't actually need me. You don't need this document. You need to just observe what your team is doing and then learn from each other, right? Of course, this helps. I help. But all the information is there. It's just a matter of rolling up your sleeves and doing it. Okay. Your case acceptance, from a numerical close rate, it should close at 60%. That's not in terms of dollar value. That's a slightly different metric and it has different implications. But if you have 100 cases, you should close 60 of them. If not, here are the things to do. Step 1, review the recordings for obvious mistakes, right? Again, if you're not pulling recordings, the first couple ones, they're going to sting a little bit because you're going to see big holes, big mistakes that are obvious to anybody that were made during that. Next, ensure the cost of inaction is landing. Again, you need to look at the recordings to see this, but you need to make sure that the patient is not just logically, but also emotionally bought in to what happens if they say no to treatment. Now, some patients will still say no, but we want them to say an informed no, not an uninformed no. Check objection handles on the fly. What this basically means is John's going to lunch. He's like, hey, I'm going to lunch. I'll be back. Okay, cool. Hey, I think lunch is too expensive, John, right? If John can't handle that objection on the fly, or if John comes into the office and you're like, hey, John, I want to think about it. And if John doesn't know exactly what to say in that moment, if it catches them off guard, then he hasn't practiced objections enough. And that's okay, right? We don't have to criticize John for that. But it means he needs to work on them. Because when you're handling objections, it's the most emotionally intense part of that conversation with the patient. So it needs to be second nature. It needs to be very deeply ingrained. It needs to be automatic default. And if it's not, then it means it's not going to be happening well. So just throw around objections through the office. You can make it a game. You can have fun with it, but make sure the team is very, very sharp on handling the common objections that you get, right? In fact, you can try this once you get off the call, right? Just find your treatment coordinator and tell them, hey, I want to think about it. Tell them, hey, this treatment is too expensive. Tell them, I want to talk to my wife, and just see what they say. They freeze like a deer in the headlights. They don't know what to say to that. Train on it, right? There's your problem. Go and fix it. Check all these steps, right? You want to check these steps in the process. Also, if you're not closing at 60%, the links in the chain apply here, right? You might be getting the patient to follow the process, but you might be losing them in one of these previous steps. So if your close rate is below 60% and the case presentation sounds good, their objections are good, you want to check all these other steps to make sure that you have them dialed in. Oops, we're getting a little ahead. And if all that is correct, then you want to check your treatment coordinator's mindset. I put this last because it's easiest to first say, oh, my treatment coordinator doesn't have the right mindset. They're not hungry. They're not pushing for this. That might be true, but if you just fix all this process here, 9 times out of 10, it'll correct that, right? Only if the treatment coordinator's mindset is particularly bad will it overwhelm doing everything else right. So check this if everything else is correct, but it's still not working, right? But 9 times out of 10, if you do all these, this isn't even going to factor in. Okay, any questions about treatment coordinator SOP? Let me know in the chat. Mia says, will we get this recording? Yes, we'll get the recording out to you. We'll send the recording and we'll send this PDF. I'll get those to Vicky and she can make sure that you get them. You're welcome. Okay, overcoming objections. This is important, especially if your team is not very good at handling objections. If you just throw objections at them throughout the office and they're not handling them, then we need to look at this section. Here's the mindset, right? Objections are little speed bumps at the end of the deal, right? Don't stop for speed bumps. When you're driving down the road and there's a speed bump, you don't come to a complete stop and then go over. You slow down and you slowly go over the speed bump, right? Okay, Mindy, I'll answer your question in this segment here because it's directly relevant, right? The speed bumps here, this is important, right? You don't stop your car for speed bumps, you slow it down. You don't stop closing the case because of objections. You slow it down and you link up with the patient. How do you do that? You're going to use the 3 E's, right? This is a very important document. I've trained it many, many times. If you've been in previous months, you've probably seen it. But essentially, all objections stem from an emotional reason first, right? The patient might say, I don't think the price makes sense, but inside it's because they're uncomfortable, right? So when you're getting an objection, know that it's emotional. You have to solve the emotion first before you can handle the logical side of the objection. And then once you solve that emotional side, the logic side becomes simple, right? That's why the basic handles to objections, like if someone says, I need to talk to my wife. Okay, well, let's call your wife, right? That usually gets met with a lot of resistance because it's not a, I need to talk to my wife objection. It's a, I'm not certain enough objection, right? But that's an emotional thing. And you thought it was a logical thing, right? Which is why it's important to drill your objections. Weekly at least, right? You should have a team huddle where you drill objections, right? Daily, if possible. And again, this can be as simple as your team walks through the door in the morning, throw a few objections out. Like, hey, you know what? I think I could get it cheaper somewhere else. See what they say, right? Handling objections happens. Again, it's in the difficult moments of the call. You're going to default to your training, right? You're not going, your team isn't going to magically start overperforming what they know how to do because they're getting objections, right? No, those are the parts where things can go sideways. Only what's really, really strong in your foundation is going to stand when objections happen. All in-person objections can be handled. This is something that your team needs to thoroughly believe. And the reason is that patient is giving you an objection, right? You need to clarify, is objection different from no, right? If a patient says, no, I do not want this treatment, I understand the consequences, I understand my diagnosis, but I'm saying no, I don't want it, right? Shake that patient's hand, say, thank you for coming in today. I appreciate your time. We wish you the best, right? The patient says no, like this is a completely different scenario. Don't try to turn a no into a yes. But most objections are like, yeah, I probably kind of want to do it. It's just I need to think about it. The money's a lot. I need to talk to my wife, blah, 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 blah. It's smokescreen, it's diffusion, it's fugazi, it's BS, right? It's not the truth. So if the patient's saying no, it's different, right? All objections that happen in person can be handled. I say in person because if you get objections on the phone, the patient might just get uncomfortable and hang up. But the patient is not going to walk out in front of you because the reason they're giving you an objection is because they're not sure of themselves to begin with. So they're not going to be sure of themselves enough to end the conversation. If your team doesn't believe this, the patient's always going to have the upper hand. Don't give your patient the upper hand. As long as the patient still wants the treatment, but they're just unsure and they're giving you objections, continue to solve them. Again, don't stop the car for the speed bumps. You just slow down. Again, objections, these are signals to continue the conversation, right? The patient's saying, yeah, I would do it. It's just I need to talk to my wife. Yeah, I think I might do it. I just want to think about it. This sounds really good. It's just it's very expensive, right? That's an objection. No, I do not want treatment. That's not an objection. That's a patient making a decision. The goal should always be to get the patient to the decision point. If that decision is no, perfect. 9 times out of 10, it's going to be yes, because the patient wouldn't have taken the time to come to the office and spend all that time with you if they didn't have a problem. It's not like somebody who's going window shopping at the mall. Maybe I'll buy that shirt, maybe I won't, right? They're just there to tickle their interest. Patients don't go to your office because they're curious. They go to your office because they have a problem, because it takes time, it's uncomfortable. There's a lot of costs that are not financial the patient incurs just to be in your presence. So most of them are going to say yes to treatment once they get clarity. You just have to get them clarity. So make sure you're drilling objections, review how to diffuse emotion with the 3 E's so that you can overcome them. All right, let's see this specific question. What's your best advice for a patient's objection regarding financial situations stopping them from booking an appointment? Financial situations stopping them from booking the appointment. We got to clarify this because, and I don't mean we need to clarify this on this call. I mean, you need to clarify that on the call with the patient, because sometimes the patient's like, hey, I'm not in a very good financial position. What they're really saying is, I'm not sure. If you're, say, talking about treatment costs on the phone, don't do that. It's in the call checklist how to handle it, right? So if you're telling the patient prices over the phone, you're not following this. If you tell the patient prices over the phone, you will get that objection a lot. If you're not, if you're having the conversation the right way and the patient still says, hey, I'm really unsure, right? Then we got to use the 3 E's. Oops. We got to use the 3 E's. Make sure this patient just isn't in emotion and figure out if that's really the issue, right? And then if you know the patient's not objecting to price on the phone because you didn't have that conversation, and you know that you've calmed that patient down, and they're still saying my financial situation is stopping me from booking an appointment, we got to figure out what that means, right? Does that mean, oh, you don't think you won't have enough money for treatment, so you're not coming in? Or like you don't have enough money to buy gas to get your car to the office, right? Those are 2 different scenarios. You want to clarify what this is, because when the patient actually says what that means, then it becomes a lot easier to solve. But just, hey, I'm not in a good financial position right now to book an appointment, that isn't true unless you charge a lot of money for your appointments. I recommend free consults for restorative work. Every office is different, but that shouldn't be an issue. If it is, again, it's because the patient is giving you uncertainty, not an objection. He says, can you give us specific examples of how to handle objections in office, especially related to finance? All that is in handling resistance with the 3 E's. You can view that in this document here. I want to get to a few other things, but essentially the patient's saying, this is too expensive. Then we're going to start by echoing with the patient, hey, I understand that's too expensive. And I know, and you're going to fill in what's important to the patient. And I know you want to be proud of your smile again. And you're going to have a lot of photos at your granddaughter's wedding. Wouldn't you like to enjoy that, right? We're going to ask the 3rd E, which is an easy question. Yes, I would like to enjoy that, calming down the emotion. Okay, when you say the treatment is too expensive, does that mean you don't think that it's worth it, like spending $20,000 to actually eat the food you want, to be out of pain, to enjoy your smile again, and have confidence? It's not worth that. Or are you telling me that this is just really going to hurt your wallet? 9 times out of 10, they're going to say, no, treatment's worth it. It's just going to hurt my wallet. Okay, perfect. Now you're having a conversation. Okay, we can break up the payment. We can run financing. We can do all these things to make it hurt your wallet less, as long as you agree that this treatment is going to help you. Again, you can see how to do that in depth in the 3 E's, but at a high level, that's what you're going to say. Okay, financing. This is really important here. The more you pitch financing, the more cases you're going to close. Full stop, right? The more patients you say, hey, we have a financing option for, the more case acceptance you're going to get. Regardless of if you present it well, which you should, but regardless of that, regardless of if they get approved, which hopefully they do, but regardless of that, the more patients you give access to more money, the more patients will say yes. So the first thing here is you want to offer financing to every patient every time, right? Start with saying, here's the payment, right? And then if the patient's like, no, I want to pay cash, okay, close the case. Just say, okay, perfect. Let's run the credit card, sign the check, get the paperwork done, schedule your treatment, right? But start with offering the financing. Even patients with cash, they probably have good credit. They're going to get a good rate, and they might prefer to keep that cash in the bank, right? Like, I don't want to take $40,000 out of my bank if I could get that money, preferably on a very good rate over a couple of years. I may pay that back on my own time to avoid interest, but it's better leverage of my resources, especially to get something that I need. So the way you do that is you start with offering the financing, right? We can go into how to do this on the script. We'll walk through this briefly in a moment here. But you need to track this, right? The more, again, it's really, really easy to just offer more patients financing. Hey, we have financing. Let's take a look at that. You just say that to every patient. And you need to track it, right? So you need to measure, okay, this is how many patients we offered it to. Here's how many applications we ran. So here's the numbers you need to look at with your tracking. 50% or more of your patients should be paying financing, right? If not, two things should be true, if not, right? Either it means that you're not selling the financing very well, which again, we need to review pitching financing. We'll do that in a moment. Or your case acceptance is above 70%. If your case acceptance is above 70% and most of your patients are paying cash, congratulations. Like, don't change what you're doing. You're in a great place. But you might be here today because you're not in that place. So again, if 50% or more of your patients are not using your financing options and your case acceptance is like 40% or 30%, then you really need to offer more and you need to improve how you're offering that. 90% of your patients should be offered financing, right? I prefer 100, but we'll give a little grace to your treatment coordinators. If that's not happening, you need to immediately review the financing script with your treatment coordinators, right? Their process should be, hey, we start with financing and then we go to cash if the patient's insistent, right? Realign their mindset. Your treatment coordinator might have their own personal beliefs about financing treatment, but if you offer it in your office, then it's your obligation to give your patient the most options that you can to help them get the treatment that they need. And if your treatment coordinator still is not offering financing, again, they're not offering it well, you train them. But if they're just not having the conversation, that should be corrected immediately. Tell everyone about it, right? It's a part of your job too. So check that, right? All your patients should be offered financing. More than 50% should be running an application. And if that's not happening, either you need to improve the pitch or your case acceptance is really good and you just have cash buyers, right? I like the second option. We got to work on the first. So what do you say? Let's see, we've got 10 minutes here. Yeah, we can leave this here. We'll depart from the 10 steps here. There were some steps we did not get a chance to review today. I'll give you all access to this document so that you can take a look. Pitching financing, how do we do it? This is the best way to open that conversation. We'll breeze through this pretty quickly here. The goal is to be running more applications, right? That's ultimately what we want. Okay, the first step is no price discussion. So do not start the conversation with, hello, Mr. Patient, your treatment is going to cost $20,000. It's going to cost $30,000. Don't do that. Even if the doctor told the patient, even if the front desk told the patient, even if your phone person told the patient, even if everybody and their brother told the patient, do not start your financing pitch with the price, right? Don't talk about it because it will derail your ability to sell that financing application. Okay, what do you do next? Next is the all options pitch. And so you just tell your patient, John, would you like to be informed of all your payment options for treatment today? Right? If you've studied the three E's, you're going to go, oh, I know what this is. This is an easy yes question. And it absolutely is. The goal is to get John to say, yes, I do want to be informed of all my options because more information is better for me, which it is. Right? But we're presenting in this way. Would you like to be informed of all your options for paying for treatment today? Yeah, I would like to be informed. Okay, perfect. So we're going to move towards running a financial application, right? Then we have to use the no impact statement. So we're confirming, hey, you know what? That's smart. I like to know all my options too. I'm just going to need a little bit more information. So pull out that financing application, start typing, and you're going to go, oh, and John, you might have been wondering this, but this will have no impact on your credit to know all your options. So we're pre-handling an objection that might come up like, oh, I don't want you to run my credit. I'm trying to buy a house. My credit score is bad. I'm trying to improve my credit, right? If you're using any of the major financing options, Proceed, Care Credit, Cherry, you can do a soft pull, right? Because once the patient has access and they see, oh, I'm pre-approved, it changes the whole conversation. So again, we're just telling the patient offhanded to pre-handle the objection. Hey, that's smart. I like to know all my options too. I'm just going to need a little bit more information. Hey, can I get your name, etc. Oh, and you might have been wondering, this is going to have no impact on your credit, just to know your options. All right. At this point, you might get objections, especially if you don't execute this very well. But then just refer to the three E's to solve the emotional objection and then continue, right? Collect the patient's information, process a soft pull. If you get to this point, congratulations, everything went well. But what might happen after this is the patient might say, oh no, I want to pay cash, right? That's a good thing. But we want to make sure that the outcome is not, I want to pay cash 3 months from now, right? The outcome is either I want to pay cash today or we're running a soft pull to give the patient all their options because a soft pull costs the patient zero, right? So if the patient says, I want to pay cash, you want to make sure that you convert that. And here's how you do that. You say, okay, hey, that's awesome. You must have really strong credit. Pause. The patient will probably nod or they'll be like, not really. Whatever they say, hey, you know what? Let's take a look anyways, because then you could keep all your cash in the bank and receive an excellent interest rate, right? At this point, some of your patients will say, hey, you know what? That makes good financial sense to me. Let's at least take a look. Some of your patients will say no, and that's fine. We're going to continue. And you want to say this sounding a little bit confused, like, oh, you really want to spend all that today? Pause. Patient will say yes if they're like, yes, I want to pay cash, right? And you don't need any other options, right? We're removing all these other objections that they might say. No, I don't need any other options. I want to pay cash today. Then you say, okay, let's start treatment. Right? So if they really resist running the application, it should be because they want to pay cash and they want to start treatment today. If that's not the case, then you're doing this wrong. Or the other possibility is that the patient does not understand their treatment, right? So this is really, really key here. Okay, we are at about 5 minutes left. I'm sure those of you on your lunch break need to be getting back. Does anyone have any questions in closing? If so, put them in the chat. Okay, no questions? Awesome. Okay, so we will make sure that you get access to this 10 steps document to the pitching finance. The pitching financing document is linked in here, so you can just use this. My exhortation to all of you today, my one request is if you spent the last 56 minutes here with us today, do something, right? Maybe all this is too much to apply all at once in your office, but start with something simple, right? If it's, hey, I'm not tracking, start tracking. If you're not reviewing calls, start reviewing calls. If your speed to lead is poor, fix it. Just choose one thing and start to work on it, because as you do that, you'll start to increase your conversion, you'll start to increase your production. And then everything starts spiraling upward because you have more time, more resources to continue implementing more of these until your practice is at a very, very healthy place. So start with something small, start with something today, make one step in the right direction, because otherwise you've wasted your time here. And I don't want that for you. So whatever you do, apply something, make a change, because if you do that, then things start to change. With that, go have an amazing rest of your day, and I will catch you all same time, same place next month. Thank you all. Bye-bye.